G'day, day number 113 here today, and it's a massive topic that I've been wanting to talk about for a long time. So I've got the amazing Tiff with me today. Tiff, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
And today I want to dive into the conversation around offshoring and automating. And so this conversation has always been around offshoring versus automating. It's been about offshoring only. It's been about automating only. But essentially, I want to change the tone and the vibe of the conversation to actually do both. To do both regarding what should we look at implementing in our organization. I really want to dive into offshoring and automating. So before I get into it, I'm going to quickly physically pass the mic over to yourself, Tiff, and do a quick intro to who you are, what you do, and let's dive into it.
Thank you. Thanks again for having me, Lucas. As Lucas has said, my name is Tiffany English. I'm the current CEO of Access Offshoring. We founded it a few years ago. One of the biggest things for us is about building sustainable growth and offering opportunities. So we do a lot to connect local businesses with Filipino staff. I have a background in business improvement and change management, so absolutely love this space. And very much aware and have been in the realm of Lucas's world for automating. So I am 100% on the same page that you have to automate and offshore, and you can do both of those in conjunction with each other.
Love it. And I love the fact that you've also been in this space, so it means that we can really dive into the nitty-gritty space. So a bit of background, and I'm not sure if I've even filled you in on this tip. A bit of background is I started offshoring, I'm going to say 15 plus years ago. A bit of history is in my previous IT support business. I initially hired Filipinos for VAs for myself personally and the business, and I hired an offshore IT support team to do all the back end IT support maintenance jobs that one our team hated doing, and two, no one got around to actually doing it because no one wanted to do them. And so back then, 15 plus years ago, this conversation was very you couldn't have the conversation. And if I think about this now, it was 7 months before I announced to my team that we even had an offshore team. They didn't even know we even had one.
Yeah,
wow. I was doing it behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how many years you've been in offshoring and what you're seeing on the
15.
ground today.
Yeah, same.
What are you seeing on the ground today when it comes to this conversation? Before we dive into the automating conversation, I'm keen to understand what are people's perception when it comes to offshoring, and is that still a thing? Or I know it was back then. Is it still a thing today?
It's certainly shifted. And I mean, just the sheer volume of companies that are using offshoring, right? So there's, millions of Filipinos, just that country alone, that are being used for Australian, UK or US companies, right? So obviously it's becoming more, people are adapting. I think there's been a huge shift, particularly since COVID. I think that stigma carried through from you and I 15 years ago right up through till probably 2020. And I think the only reason it changed was because businesses learned very quickly how to work remotely, and then went, well, if we can work remotely, then does it really matter where they are? And at that point, they started recognizing actually there's more to just grunt work and filling a seat. This is actually a really solid resource that can help build our growth, build our team, create what I refer to as sustainable growth. And so there are still some companies that I speak to that still have a stigma and still are unsure about it, still are uneasy about it, but it's becoming far more common. And if you're probably not doing it, you're probably being left behind, right? So it's changed.
But it's still only a very small percent of the Philippines. We talk about Philippines here, but across most of the countries, it's still a very small percent of their population are actually doing offshoring.
Totally, right?
Like something like 1 or 2% of their entire population.
But it's huge because the Philippines has about 130 million people. So yes, it's small in comparison to their population, but it is large compared to, say, an Australian population. And in the Philippines alone, offshoring is accounting for about 11% of their GDP. So the numbers are small, but financially it's huge. So yeah, it's pretty impactful.
Backbone of their country, essentially.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. And so we talk about this whole stigma around having offshore team members in your organization. That shouldn't be a stigma anymore. I'm hoping it's not. What I've always said from day one, we're humans, we're people, we're all the same. It doesn't matter what country we're from. We're just lucky that we're privileged white people that we were born here. That's the only
difference. What is? It's called the ovarian lottery, is what that's called.
I love that one. I wish I could say that, but I probably can't. Yeah, that's cool. So I love the fact that that thing was gone. Interesting enough that you're saying 2020 kind of changed the shift on that, which essentially changes shift on our world as well when it comes to automation and especially AI. This last 18 months, COVID. It's been a blessing in disguise for some, and obviously really harmful in other aspects. So, all right, let's dive into the detail then. Let's talk about what's happening on the ground today in 2024. In today's perspective, I'll dive into AI automation. Let's start with offshoring. I'm really keen to understand from your perspective what you're physically seeing with working with businesses, whether it's here in Australia or overseas, the type of roles that these organizations are wanting to bring on, or starting to think about bringing on. Are they still talking about let's just get a VA, but then you have to shift the educational conversation to actually can do way more? Where are people coming to you first and foremost?
I think there is still some industry expectation that the roles that you hire from another country are low level, right? They are those virtual assistants. They are low level but tasks. They are 5 hours a week, potentially full time, but they're doing bottom of the barrel things that no one else wants to do. Do they exist? Yes, but you and I are going to dive heavily into that conversation in a minute and talk about why that probably isn't where you should be focusing your attention as an owner. But what is changing is the experience out of these countries. So if you think about Australia has been using the Philippines, and I'm talking only the Philippines because that's absolutely my expertise. I have offshored in 5 or 6 other countries, but the Philippines is definitely where I've spent most of my time. So the Philippines have been utilised for Aussie business since about 1992. So we're talking a lot of exposure. And they're in various roles in various industries. And that's not to mention that they're also heavily westernized. They are taught at the bare minimum from high school and university. All their education is in English. In some areas, even primary school. So we're now talking about a culture and a country that has not only been exposed to English and westernized ways, but also has had exposure in terms of experience and skill set. So it is no longer a need to just get bottom barrel task doers. You actually can get highly experienced people. And I actually hate the word VA. Like there are some elements that, I just need a VA, that's fine. But in all of the roles we're actually placing highly skilled roles that come with experience. And they could be anything across many industries, from very experienced project administrators and project coordinators who are running construction jobs and have had experience running those in Aussie companies and therefore understand compliance, estimators and draftees with Aussie building experience, loan processors, para brokers in more of the finance world, obviously accountants, that's been a heavy focus, but then right up to like IT support networks that actually have experience managing the sort of IT infrastructure that we have in Australia and know how to pick up the phone and deal with the customer. Right. So it's not just these low level tasks. You're actually getting really highly skilled people that can add a lot of value to your team.
And that's still a conversation or educational conversation you're having. Like it's not a, hey, I'm coming to you and I really want a senior level, like in my case, it'd be a senior level developer or a senior level tech guy, with 10, 15 years experience. You're not seeing that. Like I'm talking about 2024. Are people aware of this, or is this still, are you still in the educational conversation?
I definitely an educational conversation. And the more that they're exposed to it, the quicker it becomes, right? Like we 100% are very referral based, and it's because our clients are getting skilled people who are adding value to the business and to the bottom line very quickly. And so it's extremely easy for them to say, hey, Tiff's team has access to recruit really heavy resources. So it is still an education piece. The message is getting around. Yes, can you get lower end tasks done? Absolutely. But should you take advantage of some of these higher skill roles? You bet.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've had, 50, 60 staff in the Philippines over my time. And we always started down the lower end as well. Like when I talk about the virtual assistants, and then it wasn't until you got understanding of what's actually possible in the Philippines and you started working up to the next level, then the next level. And now we only recruit high level. I say high level skilled roles. Someone who's been doing the role for 10, 15 years, someone who's got the experience on the ground, made all the mistakes, learned their lessons, But it's pros and cons because some of them, it's like hiring in Australia, right? So this is a recruitment conversation. Totally. It's you get the skilled person, but then they come with their own ways of doing things, their own attitude towards things, and then you got to try and is there a way to actually get them to actually do it your way or the better way or whatever that looks like.
How do you push out bad habits? Well, I think exactly. There's two extra points to that. So number one, there is a difference based on what sort of industry you're in. So 1992, we started with call centers in the Philippines, right? So when you're talking about call center work, there's a lot of experience. When you're talking about accounting work, there tends to be a lot of experience. Things potentially like loan processes have probably been less exposed. Sure, that you've probably got 10 to 15 years experience, but you're also looking at industry-specific roles and how much experience they have as a whole. And then the second thing to that comment is you're exactly right. You go in and you look for someone with experience, and you can do that and you can generally find it. You will absolutely pay a bit more money, but we're still talking Filipinos' wages, right? So it's nothing. But secondly to that, there's also solid opportunities to take people with lower end experience and put them through training internally and build them up really quickly to become skilled based on what you need and what you want. And I generally only recommend that if you've started with someone more skilled in the offset. Don't start your Filipino journey on someone with no experience. Start someone with experience and then start throwing in the low level, less years experience after that. You'll really start to build out a strong team.
Yeah, I love that. And what we've found that works really well is you're building that pod, right? And so you have the senior level person, the mid-level person, the junior person to bring them up through the ranks.
Absolutely.
Purely because you want to help people, upskill themselves. And usually they come with better attitudes. I hate to say it, but when they're a bit greener, they don't have the what do you call it? Like the world's not being angry to them yet, so they're learning from the ground up. And so they're just a lot nicer. But it's like you can kind of build them to exactly what you're trying to achieve. So you build that pod. I know there's different terminology we call pods in our tech world. And so they're all working with each other essentially as a group of humans, a team, to then get the outcome for that particular project you're working on or the client or whatever it might be. Are you finding that as you're educating your clients, they're not just hiring one, but they're hiring two or three, or they're actually hiring a pod of staff members now?
Yeah, they're building teams. And often it will be, if it's their first recruit, they start with one because they don't have any idea of what to expect or how it's going to embed within their team. Because often it's not even like you could get the best employee offshore, but if you don't have the right team structure or the right team attitude locally, it absolutely would fail. So a lot of the time it's that whole first recruit is your embedment process, making sure it's going to work and making sure you're recruiting effectively. And then following that, it tends to just unleash, right? Like you go from 1 to 10 pretty quick.
Well, you see the results and the outcome really quickly, right?
Absolutely.
And so as soon as you start seeing ROI, you're like, anyone who sees ROI in business, dive
go deep.
In. Yeah, exactly. Go deep as you possibly can. We probably talk all day on topic around human resources and how to manage your team.
Good.
But let's stay on topic around. Let's talk about what I think the amazing opportunity. I know because you're very much in the educational space. We're still very much in the educational space when it comes to AI. It's even though AI has been around for 60 years, offshoring's been around for probably 50 years. We're still educating people what's even possible. It used to be let's offshore versus automate. I want to use the term let's offshore and automate at the same time. Yep. In my experience this last 18 months in the AI space and AI automation, all the mundane tasks that we used to get VAs to do, eliminated, gone. You never have to do a mundane task around. You ever want to do a data dump and copy information to a spreadsheet, or take information from one spreadsheet, copy it to another, or data input that information into a CRM system, all gone. You never need to do those mundane VA type of tasks again. Not saying EAs, absolutely, you still want to hire an EA. Maybe you can talk about EAs. But from a virtual assistant and what Filipinos have typically been hired for in the past, all those mundane, and maybe you can talk about give some examples around some mundane tasks. But all those mundane tasks, essentially, in my opinion, no offense if this is not correct, in my opinion, all gone. And so I want to dive into what does that look like today, in your opinion, from the Philippines, and then let's talk about what we can focus on around the more skilled scenario.
You're 100% right. It's changing, right? And I think the world of automation, and you would talk to this more, has just accelerated at the speed of growth, right? And people are interested now. The thing that I'm still seeing, however, is people weighing up that, this, you and I are 100% on the same page. It's offshoring and automating, but people still can seem to consider this versus, do I do one versus the other? And it's because they just don't have the in-house expertise for either, right? So often when there's this automating piece, just because you don't know how to do it now doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And the mundane tasks you just listed off before, you're 100% right. All of those things can be automated. And if they're not currently being automated, you should dive into why. Because it's those tasks also that hold such heavy data and lead to metrics that may or may not be accurate if you're relying only on human touch, right?
That's right. 100%.
So it comes down to, at this point in time, if you are still utilizing people to do these tasks, then you need to utilize someone to come in like you guys and work out what can be automated and how can we make this simpler. And there's also an optimization piece in that, right? It's not always just eliminating the existing tasks. It's about optimizing what you actually want and making that happen. But what that means for offshoring, and you're right, you touched on VAs versus EAs. There is a big difference. Executive assistants, personal assistants, they come in the Philippines. They're very helpful. I have one. They are used for high-level things that can't necessarily be automated. It might be things like making sure my calendar is 100% optimized because my team know how I work most effectively. It might be managing all of my flight and my booking routines, maybe making sure all of my team meetings are in play and that the touch points are happening internally, or just managing my life in general, which she does very effectively. Those roles still exist. The tasks where I see, and we do a bit of a review every quarter at least and go, what are the tasks that everyone's doing? Are there still things we're doing that we shouldn't be doing? And you don't even realize it, but your team will pick up tasks that they've had to do for some way or another that are completely null and void, and they've just continued doing them, right? So it's important to do an assessment. And then once you've done that assessment, you can go, right, let's automate these parts of it. So I think what's happening is VAs are changing, but they're wanting to skill up. They're wanting to learn new things. Philippines particularly are people pleasing by nature, so want to continue to support and help. And they're willing to do the work to get there. So they're happily transitioning. It's whether or not the businesses are doing the same.
Mm-hmm. And what's really, I guess, really interesting to talk about, and I don't know if you're seeing this, but on the ground in the Philippines, like I'm doing a lot of interviews. So when we dive into I probably should explain what interview is because people think I'm just interviewing staff members. When we dive into a project with a client, typically the business is based here in Australia or the US. We interview all the staff members because we want to understand from the process point of view, what are they physically doing on the ground? What are the process they're following for their role, right? So we do what we call an interview. Probably should come up with a better name so we're not interviewing staff to recruit them. But we're doing a lot of that with staff members in the Philippines. So the businesses, say in Australia, have team members in the Philippines, and we're also interviewing those team members, right? And what I've found this last 3-4 months through going through this process is, as we dive into the process of these staff members, we're finding ways that they can be more efficient. And they're physically saying to me, these staff members are in the Philippines, they're physically saying, oh, if you can remove those tasks from my list, I'll be in love because I do these tasks every single day. And I just don't like doing them. They're boring, mundane. They're not value adding. And so like even ones recently was timesheets, like collecting timesheets from staff, entering timesheets manually into their timesheeting system, physically taking information from a spreadsheet and putting into a system.
Yep.
How boring. Invoicing, collecting information from a PDF document, extracting it, putting that information into a system, doing the whole invoicing process and sending the invoices out to a customer. Managing an inbox. One of our clients has a staff member, 80% of the role is just managing inboxes and filing information, extracting data, saving data into SharePoint. Just it's really administrative and they don't like doing it. It's boring. So I love the fact that because I think people's mindset initially would go towards well, you can't take those tasks away from the Philippines because that's their livelihood and don't replace those roles or those tasks but they don't want to do them. They
step them up. They're happy to. You're right. They don't want to. They'll continue to do it because they're people pleasing and they'll do whatever you need. But yeah, you're right. And they're capable of so much more. Don't forget, they're all heavily educated. Mm-hmm. There's probably more Filipinos that have degrees than Australians do.
Yep, every Filipino you meet, probably
everyone.
They've all been a nurse, or they've all been in the hospital system at some point.
Yeah, or they've all got master's degrees in business or whatever it is. They're all very clever. So they're willing to step up if you're willing to let that happen.
Absolutely. You just got to start the conversation. Recently, I was talking to Jules. So one of our staff members, Julie, she's been with us 8-9 years. She does all our, let's call it marketing, all things social media marketing, etc. She's now managing 4 brands. You know, I'm a part of four businesses. And so she's getting, let's call it a touch overwhelmed, right? And so we're diving into, we should hire another social media marketing person in a particular niche to, help her overwhelm. And as I was diving into this conversation, I was asking, and then we're doing this reflection internally, I was asking her, what is she physically doing? And so a lot of the tasks, I was like, well, why are we not looking at AI for that? Why are we not looking at automation for that? Like, just because she's always done it. And when you get overwhelmed, she's working for an innovation company, right? But when you're in a position and you start getting overwhelmed with so much on your plate, you don't really take a step back and look outside and go, actually, how can I do my job better? And so I said to Jules, your job by the end of the month is to try and automate, not automate, but at least come up with some solutions to automate these tasks. And if we get to the point that we still haven't automated and we physically need a person, then we'll hire someone. I'm not saying I won't help you, but let's try and utilize automation and AI first, right? And I think that's where a lot of, when people come to offshoring in the first place, will come to automation, it's because they're overwhelmed, they're overstaffed, understaffed, it's not overstaffed, understaffed. You can't think. That's why you need experts. That's why you need us. You need you to look from the outside in and go, actually, we can see the opportunity, right? And we can see we know what's out there, and we also know the opportunity of business. Let's connect two and two together to make that happen. Do you have a process? This is going on a side topic now, but I'm just really curious, actually. Do you have a process that you go through to identify what's actually possible in a business?
Yeah, and you know what? It's interesting, right? Because generally, from an industry perspective, I can rattle off pretty quickly, hey, here's some tasks that we've have other Filipinos doing for clients similar to you. Which of these are relevant, right? And obviously, coming from the background I come from, one of our core differences actually as an offshore provider is that I'm on the road and I'm speaking to our clients. I'm walking into clients' offices. I'm like, that should be taken offshore. I'll introduce people to you and I'm like, okay, this is really absolutely insane in terms of the lack of automation you have here. So I do a lot just off the back end of my exposure that will tell them, hey, yeah, here are the extra tasks that you can do. And then because we hire so many roles and specialist roles, it's very simple for us to say to a client, right, here's some similar roles. And also here's some resume examples of people that we have just hired who have just secured a job in your space and look at what they're capable of. And that instantly opens up their eyes, right? You're like, oh, wow, I didn't even realize I could get this level of expertise. In some cases, I don't even think they're expecting a resume, right? When they're hiring offshore, they're thinking they're just getting anyone and they're getting thrown in.
That's what?
Right? I know. And look, there are some offshoring providers that certainly work like that. It's not how I work. I believe heavily in a solid recruitment process. So yes, it's twofold. It's making sure the client understands what's capable and then also showing them other examples of when it has actually worked.
Which makes sense, which I think that's a great process to start. Because, most organizations, if you're still in the education phase, right, it's like, where do I start? It's like, that's why the whole education phase exists, right? Otherwise, everyone would be doing it. Let's dive into some best practices for combining the skilled offshore, or let's go just to offshoring and AI automation, because I really want to understand and what I want to love, I guess, to take away from this session, and I want to send this to our clients, is around anyone thinking about this, is the offshoring component. We talk about, you just briefly touched on it. Let's go a bit deeper if you don't mind. Keen to dive into how do I, one, identify the role? Because right now we're talking high level, right? So how do we identify the role or the task or the process, whatever that looks like? And then two, what are the next steps for me to physically solve that problem in my business, like immediately? And I know, it probably takes 6 weeks, 12 weeks to find the right person, but
sure.
What does that look? So let's dive into, let's identify it first. So in my space, I can easily identify it because when we're doing an automation project, we can go, well, we can automate all this, but you still require staff to do this. So So it's very black and white, right? And I can go, here's a process map, go fill this gap. Are clients even thinking like that, or like
some are? Yeah, some are. It's interesting, right? And it depends what stage of business they're at. I'm having very different conversations just depending on the age of the business and the size of the business as well. So there's two parts. There's an element when you know you need a staff member. Your example just then, right? Like you've got a marketing role. It's starting to become overwhelming. If something can't be automated, then it's very simple for us to go, we're going to need someone to slot in. And you can make a decision at that level as to whether, hey, there might be an area of expertise that we're missing out of our current person that would be really helpful. Let's find that. Or it may be actually we just need someone to help support, and therefore it can be more of an assistant role and they can build up with the experience in-house. And so that becomes a really relatively simple hire because they've got an immediate need. Where there is, hey, we are absolutely just drowning, we absolutely need more people, but we're not sure where people slot in. So the first thing is to align expectations really quickly, right? I still have a couple of phone calls where people go, right, I want one person who can be like a high-level CFO and also a marketing whiz and, you know, manage all of our estimating. And I'm like, probably can't find that. But we'll try, but probably can't. And my rule of thumb is if you can't find it in Australia, unless they're a business owner, you probably can't find it offshore either, right? So it's aligning expectations to be clear on what can a human do and do well, right? We don't want necessarily someone who's high level across multiple things. And so at that point, yes,
because I had literally had this phone call last week where he said, I really need a warehouse manager. I said, great. So let's dive into the warehouse process, and then then you can put a resume together to try and find the best warehouse manager. But they also need to be able to do invoicing, and then I also want them to do social media. And I'm like, hold on, we're talking about 3 different roles here. It's like, no, I just want one person to be able to do that. I'm like, can you do that? Yeah. Okay. So why don't you do it? It's like, because people, it's not. Yeah. Anyway, I had to.
It's true, right? Yeah. It's. Yeah, and that would be ideal, but it's not going to work. And look, you may find someone who's willing to give each of those things a go, but they're not going to be effective in any of them, right? Like, so that's point number 1. But when it comes to when the client is a little unsure about what they could need, if they don't have some sort of org chart, or I'd actually do an accountability chart, which is more role and outcome focused than it is human focused. If they don't have that in place, then it's a matter of identifying, right, what are the core things that we're doing? But also one of the first steps I'll take is trying to level up their existing local staff. That is generally the first step that I take. So the task that I normally give these clients is I want you to sit with a notebook next to you, and I want each of your team members to sit with a notebook next to you. And every task that they do over the course of the next week that they don't have to do, or that they're finding boring as hell, or that they just don't want to do, or it's not value adding, and I talk about the 10 versus 100 or even $1,000 tasks, write it on the list. And that generally forms a pretty good JD. And that might be multiple roles. That might be one role. It depends on the industry and the person, but that's usually a really good place to start if you don't yet know where to start. Get some of that low level stuff off.
And you get like people are actively doing that, or do you get pushback on that? Like, because it takes time to physically write down every single task you're doing, and I guess putting into a column, or what do I like doing?
Yeah, look, I say to clients, don't overthink it, right? Like, I don't care if you scribble on a piece of paper. All we're trying to identify here is what are the tasks that we could take off people's plates. And one of the biggest selling points that is often completely misconstrued is this ability for an offshoring team to elevate your local team. Because what are the local team generally good at? Face-to-face, customer strategy, value add, putting more money on the top line or the bottom line. So if you all of a sudden have this back office ability, those people can spend more time doing those things and less time doing the things that they can do at 7 o'clock at night in the office, because that's the only time they've had time to do it, right? So one of the first conversations you need to have is not do what a Lucas did and not tell your staff for 7 months that you're using an offshore team, but bring your team in early and say, look, we're looking at doing this. And the reason why is because we need to elevate you guys. We need to stop you guys doing some of these low-level tasks because they're not helping, they're not value-adding, and they're not worth the money, right? You're paying good money for local staff now, really good money. And so as long as you have that conversation and it's really strategic and everyone has buy-in, it's really easy for them to start jotting down. And a lot of the time I'll have the admin and account staff like writing a list before I've even finished the conversation. Right, Tiff, I'm done. Here's my list. Like, because they're also waiting for this to happen.
Yeah. And I see this a lot, and not being sexist here, but it just happens to be a male-female thing. Females are amazing when it comes to operational task-driven scenarios, and so they literally just start jotting straight away. Guys sit there going, "What do I do?" And it takes them, usually a week or 2 weeks to go through what they physically do to jot it down. And I think it's just the way our brains work, because I'm the same. If you ask me tomorrow, I'll have no idea what I did yesterday. And so so I love that. I love that process you go through, because I know we're talking about offshoring and automating, but we both do the exact same thing. I just have to ask it a different way, right? But I think I love the way you do things too. It's always like, 2 questions I always get people's mind thinking. What is the biggest frustration in your organization today? Organization, role, department, whatever that might be. What is the biggest frustration? If you could come to work tomorrow and you never had to do that task, that role ever again, what would that look like? And what would that how would that make you feel? Because then we automate the shit that they hate doing.
Yep.
And same with you. Exactly.
And all of this stuff, automation and offshoring, is really heavily underestimated in how much it improves employee satisfaction.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like, it absolutely improves not only onshore satisfaction, but also your retention numbers. So don't underestimate this. Don't put it off. It is actually potentially the thing that creates a business that is sustainable, that has happy employees.
100%. You can't go past that. And that's any staff member anywhere in the world. People are people, and they just love feeling valued. They love contributing. They love adding to the bigger vision. 100%. Are you happy to dive in and keep going if you want, Tiff? But I want to get your input into one last thing, if you don't mind, and that is around the mindset of the people that you're working with. What I mean by that is, what I'm finding, the people that are coming with a automation or an offshoring mindset, people who are like already in their mind, they've already dove deep, but they haven't started yet. So as they commit to doing it, I get phone calls a week or 2 weeks later going, okay, you've already done that for me, but like 6 months away from doing it. But in their mind, they've already actioned that in their mind. Can we now work on the next thing? I'm like, but we haven't done the first thing yet. Are you finding that when you start this conversation, is it very similar in the offshoring space, where once they commit, they're going all in?
Yeah, I think if you've, and it's, you and I are constantly on a mission to make sure we find customers that align with our values and that are wanting to continue to optimize and do better and run better businesses, right? So when we find that, you're right. They are like, okay, this has worked. Let's keep going. Probably a little easier for me, right? Because I can do a recruitment strategy for 1 role or 5 roles, and it doesn't really matter. So I can put in multiple people pretty easily. And often that is attractive because everything can be onboarded, trained, all at the same time, right? So there are elements where it is easier. So yes, I find that they're all in. And what I find the most is that they're then very quickly to continue to add roles, and they'll go from being unsure of 1 role to going, no, let's do it. I think this is the right step for us, to it being so perfect in alignment that they're like, okay. And within 6 to 12 months, they're up to 5, 6, 7, or 10 roles.
That's pretty epic.
Because it just, right. And it just adds so much extra capacity to their team. So they're no longer running on, the final bit of fuel in the tank. They're all actually really running an effective business. They've got capacity, they've got resources, they're able to deliver on what they say they're going to deliver on, and it's not killing their bottom line. In fact, it's probably building it.
And the number one thing, the staff love it, because they're being empowered to do amazing tasks in those different roles in the business, right? And one thing that's always missed, and I'm very passionate about the Philippines because that's been my world for 15 years, is what they get to give back to their community, what they give back to their families, what they give back to the very giving, people, right? They essentially, the one thing that I'll talk not poorly but down on Philippines is they don't think about themselves first. They always think about others, which is amazing, but it doesn't help their lifestyle situation. And so the great thing about being able to employ Philippine staff is you're not just helping them. You're not just helping their greater family, which essentially is 15, 20 people in their family. You're essentially helping their entire community, because as soon as they lift up, everyone lifts up. Are you seeing, because you're very remote, right? If I understand this, you hire anywhere in the Philippines. There's no real demographic section that you focus on.
Yeah, correct. On the proviso, because we provide hardware that I can get it there and get it back. So, and infrastructure is important to us. So there are certain areas of the Philippines that just aren't built up enough to warrant this sort of working environment. But yes, and you are so right. And the reality is they just culturally live very different to what we're used to. Very different. They live generally with their entire family. The eldest is responsible for financially supporting not just their parents who are now living with them again, but also all of their siblings. They're responsible for financially putting their siblings through university. They have financial burdens that we wouldn't even consider to have, right? All the while trying to keep a roof over their head. They live different to us. They have far different amenities than us. And you're right. They take their income and they push it back into either their family or their community. One of my marketing girl, actually, she said to me a couple of months ago, Tiff, because of what you pay me, because of the job I have and the opportunity you've given me, I've been able to go and support an orphanage financially every week. So she's taking her money to go and support area. Oh, right. And you just go. And so that actually, on our last trip, we were like, let's do the same. Let's go to that same orphanage. Me and one of our clients went with all of our teams, and we financially took a whole heap of food and, stuff. And we too got to, and you could see why they do it, because it is just absolutely just unbelievable. Like, it's just such a great feeling. But that's what they're doing. So yes, you're right. You're not just changing one person's life, you're changing potentially their entire community.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we found last year, was it last year with the major cyclone? Maybe 2 years ago now, actually. The major cyclone typhoon happened in the Philippines. Most of our employees' houses got absolutely destroyed, like completely wiped out. And they obviously had to go live with other family and relatives and friends and family. What I loved about a really shitty situation, thank God, touch wood, no one died in our circles. But what I loved about the situation was the customers in Australia, the connections in Australia, people who have been dealing with our team members for 5-10 years, they all got behind them and physically donated money to help them rebuild their houses. And
that gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, I was not expecting it. It was amazing. And fast forward 18 months, they were all able to rebuild their homes and and get back on with life. So it's a win-win in both scenarios. It's win that they get to add loads of value to your organization and your business at a third of the cost, but also it's a win to have that happen. And the people you've been serving and you've been working with, they treat you like family. They treat you a part of being here in Australia, but obviously you're not.
Yep. And they'll treat you the same, right? They're really loyal. And it always fascinates me. Like, these major typhoons hit way more than we could ever expect. And they just, half the time, they don't even communicate it with you, right? They just get about their day and they find somewhere else to work and they keep going. Like, they're like, I cannot disrupt the workload, right? They might be down for an hour and then they've made up the time before the day's ended. And that fascinates me, because in the midst of natural disasters where they are losing houses, they are, really just, their worlds are being turned upside down, their priority is still to support you as their employer. And that still just gets me every time. Like, I have to follow the news in the Philippines because they won't tell me if a typhoon hits, right? Like, if I don't know about it and I don't bring it up, they don't tell me because they don't want to disrupt me. So that,
it's just normal life.
Yeah. So it's an amazing country to support.
We're privileged white people. We don't have any of this shit happen to us in our world. I don't know why people even complain here in Australia. We have everything going for it.
It's just context. We just don't have context, right? But get over there, like. And one thing I will say to everybody, like, if you do have staff in other countries, make the effort if you can, right? Get over there and see them, because it not only gives you more context into who they are as individuals and how they live, but it also just completely forms this bond and embeds a loyalty and a longevity with that person that you can get so much quicker and easier if you're there face to face.
Plus, it's an amazing business expense because the best island, the most gorgeous island in the world.
One of the national wonders of the world is there. You can go swimming with whale sharks. There are some amazing places to see in the Philippines.
Yeah.
Worth tapping on a weekend.
It's been amazing, Tiff. Any last points you want to dive into from an offshoring automation perspective?
I think it's just, if you haven't started, you've got to, right? Speak to the experts. There's a lot of people educating in this space, but you've got to get on top of it, because if you're still trying to build a business without automation and without offshoring, you will be left behind. And from probably one aspect alone is a cost perspective. So from that aspect alone, look at it, build it in, see how you can make those changes in 2024, and watch how the business will skyrocket.
It's all about ROI. It's all we always talk about in automation. There's no point doing an automation gig or hiring offshore staff. There's no ROI in place. But we're both in that space, and the ROI is ridiculously huge. 400, 500, 800% sometimes. So it's a no-brainer, right? So thank you very much. This has been amazing. Hopefully for everyone out there listening and watching, please reach out to us, reach out to anyone in your network who's already gone through this process. It's not daunting. It's actually quite straightforward. There's nothing to fear. There's all the hard work. I talk about Telstra and Optus, right? All the hard work that these companies put in, yes, that's where the stigma came from 15, 20 years ago. They set the infrastructure up.
Oh, totally. Yeah. It's done. Agreed. And there's a lot of resources, a lot of great experience, a lot of people in both of these spaces. Lucas does such a fantastic job from an automation piece. We hire some unbelievable people that still shock me. So yeah, get on it. Hurry up.
Absolutely. Let's do this, team. All right. Thank you very much, Tiff. Amazing.
Thanks, Lucas.
Cheers.
See ya.